Tonight, while the world outside keeps moving like nothing has changed, there is one person lying in a hospital room with only one name refusing to leave their mind. Yours. They have replayed your face, your voice, and the last moment between you more times than anyone knows. And now, after everything that happened between you, they are terrified they may have waited too long to tell you the truth. Because something happened inside that hospital room that made them realize exactly who their heart has been searching for all this time. And what they want to say to you cannot wait another day. Listen carefully. Because this is not simply a story about someone being in a hospital. This is about what happens when life suddenly becomes quiet enough for a person to hear the truth they have been running from. Your soulmate has had hours to stare at those white walls, listening to footsteps outside the door and watching nurses come and go, but none of that has been able to distract them from you. Every time they close their eyes, another memory returns. The way you once looked at them when you still believed everything would work out. The conversations that ended too soon. The words they should have said but swallowed because pride, fear, family pressure, or bad timing convinced them there would always be another opportunity. But now they understand something painful: another opportunity is never guaranteed. And that realization has shaken them deeply. Earlier, someone sitting beside their hospital bed noticed how unusually quiet they had become. They asked if something was hurting. Your soulmate said no. Then they asked what was really bothering them, and for several seconds your soulmate refused to answer. Their eyes simply moved toward the phone sitting beside the bed. That person followed their gaze and immediately understood that this wasn't about physical pain. It was about someone. It was about you. Your soulmate finally whispered that there was one conversation they desperately needed to have. One person they needed to hear from. One truth they could no longer keep buried inside themselves. The person beside them asked, "Then why don't you call?" Your soulmate didn't answer. Because calling you means confronting everything. It means admitting they made mistakes. It means admitting that despite everything that happened, despite every attempt to move forward, despite everyone who told them to forget you, there is still a part of their heart that never completely left you. And that is exactly why they are frightened. Don't skip what comes next, because this is where the situation inside that hospital room suddenly changed. A family member entered carrying several personal belongings that had been collected for your soulmate. Clothes. A charger. A few documents. And one small item your soulmate had apparently kept hidden for much longer than anyone realized. The moment they saw it, their entire expression changed. They reached for it immediately. The family member looked confused and asked why something connected to you was still being kept after all these years. Your soulmate stared at it for a long moment before finally saying something nobody in that room expected. Because I never stopped caring. Silence. Nobody argued. Nobody knew what to say. And for the first time, your soulmate didn't try to take those words back. They began speaking about you openly. About the moments when they wanted to contact you but stopped themselves. About nights when they wondered whether you still remembered them. About important days when they secretly hoped your name would appear on their phone. About how many times they convinced themselves that losing you was simply something they had to accept. But lying there in that hospital bed changed something. They no longer want acceptance. They want honesty. And there is one sentence they have been practicing quietly in their mind, because if they get the chance to speak with you, they don't want fear to steal the moment again. They want to tell you that losing you affected them far more deeply than they ever admitted. They want to tell you that there were things happening behind the scenes you never fully knew. They want to explain why they became distant when their heart was actually pulling them closer. Most importantly, they want to know whether the door between you is completely closed, or whether somewhere inside your heart, there is still enough space for one honest conversation. But something else happened before they could reach for that phone. The door opened again. This time, someone from the family stepped inside carrying news your soulmate wasn't expecting to hear. And strangely enough, that news involved you. The family member walked slowly toward the hospital bed, but there was something different about their expression. Your soulmate immediately sensed that this wasn't a normal visit. The room suddenly became uncomfortable and quiet. Even the person sitting beside the bed stopped speaking. Your soulmate looked directly at them and asked what had happened, but instead of answering immediately, the family member placed an old envelope on the small table beside the bed. Your soulmate recognized it instantly. Their face changed. Their hands became still. Because that envelope belonged to a chapter of their life everyone had been pretending was finished. The chapter that still had your name written all over it. For years, your soulmate had been told a version of the past that made them believe walking away from you had been unavoidable. They were made to believe certain decisions had already been made, certain feelings had disappeared, and certain doors had permanently closed. Whenever they questioned what really happened between you, somebody always had an explanation ready. Eventually, your soulmate stopped asking questions, not because they stopped loving you, but because they became exhausted from fighting against a story everyone around them seemed determined to make them believe. But now, inside that hospital room, the family member finally admitted that the story had never been completely true. They confessed that there had been a message meant for your soulmate years ago. A message connected directly to you. Your soulmate was supposed to receive it, but someone inside the family decided they shouldn't. They believed they were protecting your soulmate from making what they considered the wrong decision. They thought time would erase everything. They thought your soulmate would eventually build another life and never look backward. But they underestimated one thing. The connection your soulmate had with you was never something that could simply be erased by silence. Your soulmate stared at the envelope and asked the question everyone in the room was afraid to answer. How long did you know about this? The family member lowered their eyes. That silence gave the answer before any words could. Your soulmate's breathing changed. This wasn't ordinary anger. This was the pain of suddenly realizing that years of confusion might have been built around information they were never allowed to see. They looked toward the window, struggling to control their emotions, and then quietly asked, "Did they think I abandoned them?" Nobody answered immediately. That broke something inside your soulmate. Because suddenly they weren't thinking about their own heartbreak anymore. They were thinking about you, waiting for an explanation that may never have arrived. They imagined you wondering why someone who once cared so deeply suddenly became silent. They imagined you questioning whether everything between you had been meaningless. And the thought that you may have carried that pain alone made their eyes fill with tears. Don't skip this moment, because what your soulmate said next completely changed the atmosphere in that room. They looked directly at the family member and said, "If I had received this when I was supposed to, my entire life might have been different." Nobody disagreed. Your soulmate slowly opened the envelope. Inside was something they had never seen before. They began reading. At first, their expression showed confusion. Then disbelief. Then something much deeper. Their eyes stopped halfway down the page as though one sentence had taken every bit of strength out of them. They read that sentence again. And again. Then they covered their face. Because suddenly they understood that one of the biggest assumptions they had carried about you for years had been wrong. You had not simply forgotten. You had not walked away without caring. There had been something your soulmate was supposed to know. And now, after all this time, they were finally seeing it with their own eyes. The family member tried to explain why the truth had been hidden, but your soulmate raised their hand and stopped them. They didn't want excuses anymore. They didn't want another person deciding what they should feel. They didn't want another carefully edited version of the past. They wanted you. They reached toward the phone beside the hospital bed, but before touching it, they hesitated. Not because they had changed their mind, but because one terrifying question suddenly entered their heart. What if they were already too late? What if you had spent so many years learning how to live without them that hearing their voice now would only reopen an old wound? For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared at your name on the screen. Then they whispered something so quietly that only the person closest to the bed heard it. "I don't need them to forgive me immediately. I just need them to know the truth." Their finger moved toward your name. But before they could make that call, the family member suddenly said, "Wait. There is one more thing you need to know before you contact them." Your soulmate looked up. And what they heard next made them put the phone down. Because the hidden message wasn't the only secret connected to you. There was another decision made years ago. And this time, your soulmate's family could no longer hide who was truly responsible. Your soulmate froze with the phone still resting in their hand. The family member stood near the hospital bed, struggling to find the courage to finish what they had started. For years, everyone had protected the same secret, believing that enough time would eventually make it irrelevant. But seeing your soulmate lying there, asking for you before asking about anything else, had finally destroyed that silence. The family member pulled the chair closer and said, "The message wasn't the only thing kept from you. There was a meeting, and you were never supposed to find out about it. Your soulmate's eyes immediately sharpened. What meeting? They asked. The answer came slowly. Years ago, when everything between you and your soulmate was falling apart, someone close to the family had privately met with a person connected to you. That meeting happened without your soulmate's knowledge. Decisions were discussed. Assumptions were made. Words were exchanged that eventually influenced what both of you believed about each other. And the most painful part was that neither you nor your soulmate had been given the complete truth. Your soulmate tried to sit higher in the hospital bed despite being told to rest. At that moment, physical exhaustion didn't matter. They wanted names. They wanted dates. They wanted to know exactly who had decided they had the right to interfere with something so personal. But the family member kept repeating one sentence: "We thought we were protecting you." That sentence only made your soulmate more emotional. Protecting me from what? They asked. From the person I loved. Nobody in the room could answer that. For the first time, the family could see the consequences of what had happened. They had expected time to replace you. They had expected new people, new responsibilities, and new chapters to eventually make your soulmate stop looking backward. From the outside, perhaps it even appeared that way. Your soulmate smiled when they were expected to smile. They attended family gatherings. They continued with life. They rarely mentioned your name. But nobody knew what happened during the quiet hours. Nobody knew how often your soulmate searched through old memories. Nobody knew there were nights when they almost contacted you. Nobody knew that certain songs, places, dates, and conversations could still bring your face back into their mind without warning. And now, lying inside that hospital room, they were tired of pretending those feelings had disappeared. The family member finally admitted something even harder. At one point, your soulmate had apparently tried to reach you, but someone convinced them that you wanted nothing more to do with them. They were told that contacting you would only create more pain. Your soulmate believed it because they were already emotionally exhausted. So they stepped back. But now they were discovering that the situation had never been that simple. Your soulmate looked down at the old envelope again. Their eyes remained fixed on the words connected to you, and their voice began to shake. All these years, they whispered. I thought they chose to forget me. Then came the answer that changed everything. Maybe they thought the same thing about you. Your soulmate closed their eyes. That sentence hurt more than anything else they had heard. Because suddenly the years between you didn't feel like proof that love had disappeared. They felt like years built on silence, fear, interference, and two people believing completely different versions of the same ending. Your soulmate reached for the phone again. This time there was less hesitation. Don't skip this, because what happened next wasn't something anyone in that room expected. Instead of calling immediately, your soulmate opened an old conversation. They scrolled upward slowly, reading messages they hadn't looked at in a very long time. Some were ordinary. Some were emotional. Some carried memories nobody else would understand. Then they reached the final conversations between you. Your soulmate stared at them for several minutes. Suddenly one detail stood out. Something they had overlooked years ago. One of your final messages had never sounded like someone who wanted to disappear forever. Your words sounded like someone waiting for an answer. Your soulmate whispered, "How did I miss this?" But deep inside, they knew. They had been hurt, confused, surrounded by voices telling them what everything meant. And sometimes when a heart is wounded badly enough, it accepts the explanation that hurts because fighting for another possibility feels impossible. Now they wanted that possibility back. Your soulmate began typing. They wrote several sentences, deleted them, started again, deleted everything once more. How could they possibly compress years of regret into one message? How could they say, "I never knew"? How could they say, "I still think about you"? How could they ask whether you would listen without making you feel pressured to reopen something you had fought so hard to survive? Finally, they typed something simple. "I learned something today about what happened between us. I don't know what your life looks like now, and I don't want to disturb your peace. But if you're willing, there is something I should have told you a long time ago." Their thumb hovered over the screen. The entire room seemed silent. Then your soulmate pressed send. For several seconds, nothing happened. They placed the phone beside them, but their eyes never left the screen. 1 minute passed. Then another. The family member suggested they rest, but your soulmate quietly refused. They had waited years for this moment. A few more minutes felt unbearable. Then the screen suddenly lit up. A notification appeared. Your soulmate grabbed the phone so quickly that everyone in the room turned toward them. Their eyes widened, because there was a response. But before opening it, your soulmate noticed something else beneath your message, something that made their hands begin to tremble. You had apparently tried to reach them before. And the date attached to that attempt was connected to the exact period when the family had told your soulmate that you wanted them gone. Your soulmate slowly looked toward the person standing beside the hospital bed. There was no anger in their face anymore. Only shock. Because now there was evidence. And the question was no longer whether someone had interfered. The question was how far they had gone. And what else had been hidden from both of you. The hospital room became painfully silent. Your soulmate kept staring at the date on the screen, comparing it again and again with everything they had been told years ago. There was no misunderstanding anymore. There was no easy explanation that could make this disappear. You had tried to reach them during the exact period when they had been convinced that you wanted nothing more to do with them. And suddenly, one terrible possibility entered their mind. What if the separation between you had survived for so long because both of you were waiting for an answer that neither one ever truly received? Your soulmate looked directly at the family member and asked, "Did you know they contacted me?" The question was calm, but everyone in the room could feel the pain underneath it. The family member looked away. That tiny movement was enough. Your soulmate didn't need another confession. Their eyes filled with tears as they realized that this wasn't simply about one hidden envelope anymore. There had been multiple opportunities for the truth to reach them, and somehow those opportunities kept disappearing. The family member finally admitted that people around your soulmate had been afraid of what would happen if the two of you spoke again. They knew your soulmate still had feelings for you. They knew one honest conversation could undo every attempt to push the relationship into the past. So whenever your name returned, someone found a reason to discourage contact. Sometimes they called it protection. Sometimes they called it moving forward. Sometimes they insisted that reopening the past would only create another heartbreak. But your soulmate now understood the difference between protecting someone and controlling what they were allowed to know. And that realization changed everything. They looked around the hospital room and said, "You all kept telling me to move on, but none of you ever asked whether moving on was what I actually wanted." Nobody answered. Your soulmate continued, their voice becoming more emotional with every sentence. They explained that they had spent years blaming themselves. They wondered whether they hadn't loved you enough, fought hard enough, or understood you well enough. They replayed your ending hundreds of times, searching for the moment everything went wrong. And now they were discovering that some of the answers had been sitting in other people's hands all along. But then their phone vibrated again. Everything stopped. Your soulmate looked down. It was you. This time, there was more than a notification. There was a message waiting to be opened. Their fingers trembled as they touched the screen. For 1 second they couldn't bring themselves to read it. They had imagined hearing from you countless times, but imagination had always been safer than reality. In their imagination, there was still time. There was still hope. There was still a chance that you remembered them exactly as they remembered you. Reality could be different. You could tell them never to contact you again. You could say too much time had passed. You could say you had finally found peace without them. And your soulmate knew they would have to respect whatever answer you gave. Still, they opened the message. Their eyes moved slowly across the words. Then they stopped. The family member watching them expected tears, but something else appeared first, a small expression of disbelief, followed by an emotion your soulmate had not allowed themselves to feel for years. Relief. Because your response wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. And it wasn't a goodbye. You had simply made it clear that there were things you had never understood either. Things you had wanted answers to. Things you had carried quietly because you believed your soulmate had chosen silence. Your soulmate pressed the phone against their chest and closed their eyes. For the first time, they understood that the pain hadn't belonged to only one side. You had questions too. You had memories too. And perhaps you had spent years trying to understand the same unfinished story. Don't skip what happened next, because your soulmate made a decision nobody in that hospital room could stop. They asked everyone to leave. The family member tried to argue that your soulmate needed rest, but they refused. "I need 10 minutes alone," they said. "For once, I need to make this decision without somebody telling me what I should do." One by one, everyone walked out. The door closed. Your soulmate was alone. They looked at your name on the phone and began recording a voice message. At first, nothing came out. They stopped the recording. Tried again. Stopped again. Then on the third attempt, they stopped trying to sound strong. Their real emotions finally came through. They told you they had learned the truth. They told you they were sorry for believing things without asking you directly. They admitted there were nights when they wanted to contact you but were afraid you had already closed that chapter. And then they said the words they had been carrying since entering that hospital. "I don't know what happens after this. I don't know whether we can repair what was lost. But I couldn't leave this hospital still allowing you to believe that you meant nothing to me. You did. You still do." Your soulmate stopped recording. They listened to the message once, then sent it before fear could change their mind. The phone remained silent. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Your soulmate finally placed it down and closed their eyes, emotionally exhausted. Whatever happened next was now in your hands. But just as they began drifting toward sleep, the phone rang. Your name appeared across the screen. Your soulmate stared at it, almost afraid to move. Then they answered. For several seconds, neither of you spoke. Years of distance were sitting inside that silence. Your soulmate finally whispered your name. And the moment they heard your voice on the other side, tears began running down their face. But what you said next was something they had never expected to hear. Because you weren't calling only to discuss the past. There was something about the present they needed to know. Something that could completely change what happened after they walked out of that hospital. And before the call ended, your soulmate would finally be forced to answer the question they had avoided for years. If life gave them one genuine chance to choose again, would they finally choose you?